Welcome back to the channel, Bridging the Gap, Student to Engineer, where STEM professionals provide advice to students. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. This school is on the central coast of California and advertises that they are a school that does hands-on learning. They're known for hands-on learning. They talk about learn well doing. So we'll see that as we go through the data, but let's get right into it. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo makes available their student outcomes on their career services page. I'll provide the link in the description for the video if you want to come right to this and see more than what we're going over in the video. All right, so if we scroll down a little bit, we've got the ability to complete the survey. Since we're not students, we won't do that, but searchable graduate student report outcomes is something that we'll get to after we look at the summary reports below. So that is something that you may need to or be interested in going into after this video. The way that Cal Poly is organized with their majors is a little bit different than a lot of other places that we've looked at. Generally, the College of Engineering has a lot of the majors that Cal Poly has in their architecture and environmental design. So we're going to go through both of those pieces of data, or the data for those two schools. And then if you are interested in any of these other ones, definitely come back via the link on the video and check out these other ones. So let's get started with the College of Engineering. So it brings us to a PDF. We cannot change the way that's displayed, so we'll just go through what is here, and then we'll go through the dashboard itself to get more detailed information. So this is for 2022 graduates. At this point, it's a little bit old, but Cal Poly seems to be a little bit lagging in their timing of providing data. What I have seen looking through the dashboards is they're pretty consistent through the year, so I'm not super concerned about that. The graduate outcomes, this is where we like to see in the 90s for positive student outcomes. Personally, I don't know how they calculated 99%. What I am seeing is that 6% are still seeking, and that's what I would consider to be a negative outcome. Depending on how you look at it, the working part-time could also be a negative outcome, but generally we just look at still seeking. So that would give us about a 94% here, not a 99. Regardless, 94% is a very good number. It is among the top schools for student outcome percentages. So I'm not upset about that number. It's just seems a little bit miscalculated. For those who haven't watched our other videos, this other pursuits, usually it's called other. There's a note down here that talks about how it is intentional plans for travel, gap year, artistic pursuit, personal commitments, those types of things. We always see those on student data or school data, so it's not a problem. It is a small number here, but it is considered a positive outcome. One thing to note here is that 10% are attending grad school. Some schools we've seen are up to 50% attending grad school. 20 to 30 is more typical, but for Cal Poly to only have 10% is an interesting piece of data. It means that if you are going to get your undergrad degree with the intention of going to get a graduate degree, you won't be surrounded by people who have the same plans. Whether or not that's a bad thing, you know, is a question we can argue. But the percent of grads from Cal Poly College of Engineering going to grad school is relatively small. Okay, let's move over to major related jobs. I really like that they provide this. A lot of most schools do not provide it. So the intent here is if I go get a degree in civil engineering and I can't find a job in civil engineering, I may get a job as a manager at a retail store. And I could, in theory, say over here that I'm, working full time, but that job wouldn't be related to my major. So it's really good to see that Cal Poly is providing this piece of data that their graduates are saying, yes, I went to school for something and I got a degree or a job in that thing, which is really good. So we'll scroll down a little bit. Of the schools that Cal Poly grads went to, that 10% attending grad school, they went to ones that, if you look at these are pretty much West Coast, mostly California, in fact, but they do go to a variety of majors. And then the median starting salary, this is slightly above average for new grads right now. And the fact that this is 2022 data leads me to believe that probably 23 data was slightly higher than this. This is a good number. Given that Cal Poly is in the central coast of California and cost of living there is higher than a lot of other places, I would have expected this to be a little bit higher, but we can dig into this a little bit more. They don't give us a lot of information about salary, but some of it is available on that dashboard. So we'll look over there in a minute. Okay, so if we go to the next page, I'm just going to scroll where I can get all of this. Okay, so when I look at data from schools, I like to see that there are a lot of companies that have relationships with the school that at this point with this data at the end is indicated by those companies hiring a number of grads. I don't want to see 100 different companies hiring one person, because that's more likely that the students are just applying one off and that the companies are not coming and recruiting at the school. So the information here in the PDF doesn't tell us how many companies, how many grads these companies are employing. So I'm feeling a little bit like this data is leaving me wanting, but we'll go into the dashboard and we'll be able to see that. The same can be said for the states and the locations. The quantity in each of these is something that's not provided. So you really can't tell if one grad went to Oregon or if 100 grad went to Oregon, for example. So we'll get that in the data. But one thing that I noticed as I looked through the various schools on the website is that nearly all of them had San Luis Obispo as the top locations. So if you're a student from anywhere really, and you want to live on the central coast of California, going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo may be the way to get there. I know that there's a lot of students who want to go there because of the location and how nice it is. I know that when I was in school, I had friends who went there, and there are more students wanting to stay in San Luis Obispo than there are jobs in San Luis Obispo, but it is a good way to get there. And if you're going to some other school and wanting to move to that area afterwards, probably or most likely those jobs are going to be taken by these local students. So something to consider when you're thinking about your long-term goals and where you want to end up, at least for the first couple of years of after school, is, does it make sense to go there that will lead to a job in the immediate area? I do want to talk about these companies up here. Walt Disney Company is not something that I've seen featured in any of the other schools I've looked at, and we have looked at some California schools. I do know that Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory is part of the National Nuclear Security Administration. Lawrence Livermore and other sites within that system, the NNSA system, like to hire grads from Cal Poly because they have that hands-on education. You'll see advertised all over the Cal Poly stuff, learn by doing, and companies that want employees who are used to getting their hands dirty, if you want to call it that, used to being out in the field, don't necessarily want to just sit at a desk. Those kind of companies are going to go hire at Cal Poly Pomona and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So Lawrence Livermore, if you're interested in NNSA as an industry, Cal Poly is a good place to go, but also do your research and understand what the other locations are within that group of sites. Okay, and then a lot of these other ones, Amazon Web, Delight, Accenture, they're PwC. They hire from a lot of schools. And so if your goal is to go work, for Amazon, you don't have to exclusively go to Cal Poly, but there are some companies on here that are definitely not as common with other schools. I'm going to provide a link to a video that I did related to using LinkedIn and a company name or an industry to find out what schools might be good for you to go to. Since we're talking about companies on here and where they're recruiting from, where they're hiring from, that video would be a really good one to go look at if, as we're talking about these companies, that's striking a chord with you and you're pretty excited about, Disney or Adobe or someone else hiring from Cal Poly. Okay, with that, we're going to go over to the dashboard. This is where they provide what looks like a dynamic dashboard, but actually is not very dynamic. So it does provide a lot more information. It does provide the ability to um, filter on grad year and department. So if you know what major you want to go into, you might come back and select a specific major. One thing to note before we get too much into the data is that this is 2017 to 2021. The PDF was 22. So again, Cal Poly's a little bit behind in providing their data from a timing standpoint. Okay, so I am going to just stick right here and just start from the upper left here. So top employers, you'll see that there are a lot of top employers. And yes, this is filtered with 5 years. So these numbers are bigger than they would be if I just did 1 year. But you'll see that, somebody like Northrop Grumman hiring 133 grads just from the School of Engineering over a 5-year period is really good. That indicates there's a strong relationship. And if Northrop Grumman is the place you'd want to go, this is a good spot to go to school. But even if it's not, there are a number of companies within the same industry that are going to be recruiting from Cal Poly. So I'm moving my mouse as I'm talking, but Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, all of those. While they do have an aerospace engineering, and I know there's a lot of students wanting to go into aerospace engineering specifically to get into the aerospace and defense industry. These numbers indicate that they're hiring a lot more than just aerospace engineers. So again, use that LinkedIn video. You can find out this information about who they're hiring and where. Okay, and then if we go to job titles, so job titles is an interesting one because every company has a different title for, very similar things often. And so a title being on the top of the list doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most common type of work. It just means that a title like software engineer is used across more companies. But it is interesting to see there is software engineering and software developer. You see a couple systems engineer, software engineer 1. There's some themes here. And then also just like project engineer, mechanical engineering. Good titles that I think are probably not too much to get excited about at this point. Okay, top job titles and salaries. This is sorted by salary. You'll see I can go all the way down to the bottom, and the minimum being 52,000 is actually pretty impressive, considering that a lot of liberal arts colleges have an average salary of 52,000. So for graduates, but what you can see as you scroll through here, and I won't really stop too much on there, but different types of job titles have different salaries. What we've been seeing across all schools is that, like we see here, the computer focused ones are on the top. They are really in demand right now. Whether or not they'll be in demand in 4 or 5 years when students who are looking at schools are going to be graduating is another thing. So I would say, any major you have within Cal Poly is going to get you a pretty good salary starting out, and it's going to be able to support you and your family and your lifestyle. So at this point, looking at this and going, oh, a hardware engineer is going to be making more than an electrical engineer. I should go do that. That's something that I would think a little bit more about before switching from something you're really interested in to something that makes a little bit more money. Okay, let's go to employer industries. Again, I like that there's a good variety of industries here with the Cal Poly grads. Computer software is the top, as you can see by the top titles and some of the companies over here. But aerospace and defense is defense and space is here, pretty high up, and also similar. We can see the same companies up above that are hiring or aligned with that. So some of the schools that we look at, I don't see a lot of defense and space or aerospace, and it's nice to see that here. Also construction and civil and environmental engineering. Those also are not heavily featured on a lot of schools, so it's nice to see that with Cal Poly. And I'll just scroll down so you can see this. Oil and energy, this is called different things in different places, but it's pretty small here. So, if you're interested in petroleum or nuclear energy and those kind of things, Cal Poly may not be the place to focus on that, but something to look into. I'll just keep scrolling into these ones that are pretty small. Structural engineering is very small, but it would also fit under civil and environmental. And wine is here, so if you want to go into that, there's a few people who have done that. All right, so yeah, there's a lot of industries that are pretty small. Forestry and fire has a 0%. So if that's something you're passionate about, you might look for another school to do that in. Okay, then let's go into outcomes by major. So the way this is listed, bar chart showing the number of grads. So over a 5-year period, the largest graduating classes are in mechanical engineering, and then computer science, civil. You can see that they get smaller and smaller. There are some discussions, and I will make a video about going to a large school with a small major versus going to a small school with your major. There's various views on that, but anyway, what we see here is mechanical is the biggest, and some of the other majors are pretty big, but at some point you get smaller and smaller, and until you've got hardly anyone doing like general engineering. But it is there, so something to look at. Okay, and then the major relatedness, this is even a little bit higher than the overall Cal Poly stats. So 98% got a job related to their major. That's really good outcome. Okay, so I'm not going to go through these very much, but the employer names are all on here, and you can see where they're located. So if you were looking for a specific company, you can see that, Aerojet Rocketdyne recruits from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. They've got 2 locations where they put graduates that are in California, and then another one in Florida. So you can take a look at these if you're very particular about where you're going to go. That might be an interesting thing for you to look at. Okay, then back to what we saw at the PDF. San Luis Obispo is the highest, but you'll also see there's quite a number of other cities that are taking a significant number of graduates. For the most part, they're in California. You just see this first page worth. Seattle's the only one that's not in California. So one thing to note, and actually I'll talk about it as I get over to top states, but Cal Poly is highly regarded on the West Coast. It is well known on the West Coast. It is well known in California, but it is not as well known on the East Coast. So if you look at these states, the vast majority of the grads are going to California. When we see more of a smattering of grads going to other places. We have an understanding that that school is a little bit more well known across the U.S. But the numbers here are pointing pretty strongly that, California is the place to be if you want to go to Cal Poly. So that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you can't move out. You can see New York, Illinois, Massachusetts are on here. It's just that if you go somewhere far east, you probably won't have a huge alumni club or, work for somebody who went to the same school as you and hired you because you went there. So interesting data that we will continue to see when we go over to the College of Architecture and Environmental Design. So I'll go through this a little bit more quickly because we've already seen a lot of it. But the outcomes are pretty similar to what we saw in engineering. Job-related or major-related jobs, pretty similar. This median salary is significantly lower. That's typically what we see with architecture. So not surprising, but just something to note. Also, the graduate programs, a lot of the grads, while they may have majored in architecture or something related to the built environment, they're going on and getting masters that are related, again, to civil engineering, structural engineering, urban planning, similar, but maybe a little bit more technical than the undergrad degree they got here. Okay. Also, something I didn't note was that only 4% are going to grad school. So the vast majority of the grads from here are going out to work and not going to school to continue their education. Okay, and then the top employers, these are all very related to architecture, design, construction, that industry. So it's not surprising at all. And then again, we've got the top states that are very similar to what we saw in engineering. And the cities, San Luis Obispo is the fourth one down on the list, where some of these larger cities in California are attracting a lot more grads, or at least the grads are having more opportunities in those other places. But if you look closely, again, the vast majority of these locations are in California. There's a few, Colorado, Illinois, and Montana. So and DC, but otherwise the grads are staying in California. Okay, so if we look at the dashboard for the School of Architecture and Environmental Design, they're pretty consistent with what we saw before. The grads are going to construction companies, design companies. That's all good. Those are all in the industry that you would expect. Project engineer, designer, all what you would expect from grads that are majoring in architectural engineering, regional planning, construction management, those types of things, which is what's in this school. So the salaries are starting a lot lower than what we saw in the other one. For a school to not mix in some of those really high-paying computer jobs, it makes sense that the overall average would be lower. But again, the architectural and construction management tend to pay a little lower than a lot of other engineers at graduation. So not surprising, but something that we are seeing. On the School of Engineering, we saw the lowest reported income was 52,000. The number here, initially you look at that and say, oh, that's lower. But in actuality, these lower salaries are for interns, not for necessarily full-time long-term jobs. So I'm going to just skip past those. There is a landscape designer that's making a little bit less, but we pretty quickly get into that 52,000 that we saw as a minimum engineering. So while the average is significantly lower than engineering, it's not like you're going to graduate and not be offered a position that pays a decent amount. Okay, so again, not surprisingly, the top industries are very aligned with architecture and construction, which is what we're seeing there. And then back to the discussion of how many students you're going to be in a cohort with in a major. Architecture is by far the the most popular, and then we get to construction management. And interestingly, the major relatedness is even higher in this. That's really good to see. Like we talked about when we looked at the PDF for the architecture and environmental design school, San Francisco is the top city. And then on that one, San Luis Obispo is a little bit farther down. The difference there is that that was the FY22, or that was the 22 data, and this is 17 through 21. So similar data, though, even though the years have changed, the situation is about the same as it was before. And then similar to what we saw in engineering, the vast majority of the grads are staying in California. And there are some that are going out of state. And interestingly, the number that are planning to work outside the U.S. is, third. That's I haven't seen that anywhere else. Some schools don't even really report the people that are going to be working outside the U.S. So, but this supports what we were talking about earlier, that if you want to move to California, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is a good way of enabling that goal. And if you already do live in California, going to the school is going to get you a degree that's going to be respected across the state, and you are going to have opportunities all around the state and possibly other locations on the West Coast, definitely. If moving to the other side of the country is what you want to do, that will also enable you to do that, just with a degree that's a little bit less well known over there. That's all the data for Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel so you can get new videos, and as you get into school, we'll be providing more videos about being an engineering student and all of those types of things. So make sure you're subscribed for future videos, and we will see you next time.